Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us yet again for our monthly webinar. My name is Jackie. I am an early childhood education expert and specialist with We Schoolhouse. Today, we are going to be exploring progressive approaches in early childhood education. So exploring what is progressive education, what does that mean, how does it differ from traditional approaches. We'll be looking at the most prominently used approaches today. So we hear a lot about Reggio Emilia, Montessori, and Waldorf, so we'll take a look at those. And we will talk about what they can look like in your classroom or your home environment. We will also look at a little bit of a history of progressive education, where it came from, and then kind of moving forward and what are some recent trends of modern day, and kind of shout out some of those. All right, it's a lot to get into, so I'm going to dive in. And I look forward to, getting to your questions afterwards. All right, so what is progressive education? So the term progressive education was coined in the late 19th century, and it was coined to distinguish a new educational movement from the traditional curriculum at the time, or that we're really still seeing a lot of the time. But the ideals and the beliefs and the approaches go back way further. It was, of course, influenced by some great thinkers and theorists and practitioners from years and years ago. The term progressive came out of years of social progressivism. So that's a trend of various social reform movements. The 20th century particularly was a time of really great reform. We had reform with labor unions and the suffragettes, the civil rights movement. It was a time of very active democracy and advocacy for human rights. And we'll see that influence in these approaches, which I love. Some key aspects of a progressive approach are definitely emphasizing problem solving and critical thinking. So we want to encourage children to take on problems, to solve them, to figure things out through exploration, through open-ended activity, really develop those critical thinking skills, teach them how to think, not what to think. Collaborative learning. Students learn by doing hands-on projects and working together. They develop social skills and reasoning. There's project-based learning. And then experiential learning. So again, those hands-on projects, those open-ended activities, children exploring their environment, and getting into again those open-ended projects, a lot of loose parts. This is in contrast to what we see a lot of the time is that product-driven craft, right? Or sitting and learning mathematical concepts and literacy concepts through a worksheet, right? Sitting at a table and doing so, putting together an apple that out of pre-cut construction paper and learning the letter A through doing so. Those things that create a cute product, but the children are not really getting anything out of it, right? So in contrast to that, we want them to have experiential learning and really get their hands busy with those open-ended projects. Child-centered learning. So teachers consider the child's perspective. They build on their developing interests and their questions and their developmental, where they are developmentally. Curriculum is flexible and responsive to the individuals of the classroom. The children can lead in their experiences. They're offered open-ended questions and activities to invite their thinking. A lot of programs may follow an emergent curriculum. So this is in contrast to more teacher-directed instruction. And I find that this especially really reflects that progressivism and that democracy in the classroom, which I think is fantastic and I find so thrilling when the children can have a say in their experience. And then lastly, the learning environment is a really big piece. So um, the learning environment in a progressive approach is supportive. It's consistent with true nurturement and really fostering positive relationships. Classrooms are often very intentionally designed in their use of space, and even the aesthetics play a very large part. So they're meant to be welcoming and calming and neutral, very home-like. The rugs and the fibers are used to create a feeling of warmth. Soft and natural lighting are utilized. The environment is also meant to foster creativity. There'll be an integration of natural materials. There will be child created artwork and even child curated spaces. Layouts are flexible and materials are accessible to foster independence, encourage curiosity, and to support collaboration. Some other aspects you might see in progressive environments are, again, that integration of nature, lots of integration of the arts and sciences, mixed age classes is something you might see a lot. Progressive approaches prioritize individual learning paths, hands-on experiences, and the integration of arts and nature into daily activities. They view education as a holistic process and nurtures not only academic skills, but also emotional, social, and creative development. So in comparison to traditional education models, which often we see prioritize standardized testing and rote memorization and uniform instruction and those product-driven activities, which can be very one-size-fits-all. More progressive approaches to education advocate for more personalized and flexible and child-centric and inclusive approaches. So let's have a little bit of a history lesson. I'm going to go back to the 1700s, and we're going to look at some founders and forward thinkers and theorists and practitioners that had influence on these progressive approaches that we see today. So Rousseau was a Swiss philosopher. He's often considered the father of early childhood education. And he emphasized the importance of allowing children to develop naturally and to express themselves, right? He really strongly believed that children should be allowed to have expression and to have say in what they're doing. He believed that children are born with innate talents, that they have potential. He also recognized that learning and development happens through play. So he said, one of his quotes, "When the child flies a kite, he is training eye and hand to accuracy," right? So in play and doing things like flying a kite, there is so much learning and development to unfold there. And then we have Pestalozzi, also from Switzerland, and very much influenced by Rousseau. He believed that children should learn also through activity and through the handling and use of material objects, like tangible experiences. He wanted children to have room for spontaneity, to have that free play, to generate their own ideas. He viewed education as a means also, which I love this because I know people are joining us today from all over the world, but in the US and I think also globally, there is a huge discussion on really trying to shine light on how important early childhood education is for not just the children, but just the future of society. And really trying to get people to recognize that. And, so let's go back to, late 1700s, early 1800s, and we have Pestalozzi, who, yeah, is there saying that, education is a means of improving the conditions of society. So these are not new ideas. Um, he was also a very big advocate for a mutually respectful teacher-learner relationship, right? It is, we work together and we respect each other. It goes both ways. Then we have Froebel from Germany. He was a student of Pestalozzi. He coined the term kindergarten. He's the founder of kindergarten. He believed also children learn best through play and through self-activity. He introduced the use of things such as wooden blocks and other loose parts in a classroom, and natural materials using sticks and clay and sand, chalk, and also introduced occupations into the classroom that would support children's self-initiated play, right? So areas of learning, areas of focus, using loose parts and allowing children to have free play and to move flexibly throughout these areas. And then I'm going to go to John Dewey. We're going to now jump from Europe over to America. So John Dewey is considered the American founder of progressive education. He too advocated for learning by doing. He believed that children learned best when they have active participation in their own education. He was an advocate for play-based learning. He also was an advocate for interdisciplinary curriculum, so having many areas of study and focus areas for children to explore. He was also a proponent of the emergent curriculum, right? He wanted teachers to plan their curriculum by observing the children and seeing what interests they have unfolding and how their development is unfolding, and then being responsive to that. He also believed in the teachers as facilitators. So there's a lot that we definitely got from Dewey as well. I'm now going to jump to Brazil. So we have Paulo Freire. He was a Brazilian philosopher and educator. He too emphasized that there should be a democratic relationship between the teacher and the students, that teachers are also learners. He opposed what he called the banking method, where teachers are thought to know everything and students don't know anything. He found it to be very oppressive, and he even related it to colonization. And so just a really big advocate in social reform in that way. And then lastly, I will introduce you to Caroline Pratt. So she was very influenced by Froebel. We're coming back to the United States now. She was influenced by Froebel. She opened a play school in New York, which later became the City and Country School. She opened the school for children of working class families. She was also huge on play-based learning. Her philosophy of teaching was also based on children's interests. And through play, she saw that the children were allowed to learn experimentally. She also rejected the idea of a fixed curriculum, and she wanted to allow children to freely choose their play projects. She used blocks and other loose parts, and is in fact the person credited for developing wooden blocks, the unit blocks that we see in a lot of classrooms today. So there's a little history lesson, just so you know that there's a whole background to this, right? Now today, we see three approaches used the most. And those are the Reggio Emilia approach, the Montessori method, and Waldorf. So we'll look at those specifically. Reggio Emilia was developed in the 1940s, post-World War II in Reggio Emilia, Italy. The approach was born from the town and then cultivated by Loris Malaguzzi. So Loris Malaguzzi was a educator and philosopher, and he came in to this town it was a small town of people who post World War II wanted to set their community on the right path for a more successful and better future. And they recognized that they needed to do that starting with their youngest population, right? So they wanted to open up a community school for their children. And they followed the expertise of Loris Malaguzzi in doing so. This approach took off and became very popular globally in the decades to follow. Some key aspects to this approach, to the Reggio Emilia approach, are viewing the child at the center of learning, the use of open-ended materials or loose parts, project-based learning, using an emergent curriculum, the learning environment, documentation, embracing community, and teacher as a learner. So let's take a look at the child at the center of learning. In Loris Malaguzzi's words, stand aside for a while and leave room for learning. Observe carefully what the children do. And then if you have understood well, perhaps teaching will be different from before. So we have an image of the child. In the Reggio Emilia philosophy, we understand that children have the right to quality education and equal opportunities with no obstacles to their development. We also understand children to be competent and capable. They're citizens and participants in their community. They're naturally curious and they're social beings. The image of the child also means that us as individuals, we all have our own view of the child, and we have to be very mindful of what our view of the child is, because that view is going to dictate and guide how we interact with that child and what we offer them. So that is the idea behind the image of the child. Then there's also the 100 languages, which is a term coined by Loris Malaguzzi. And it's a metaphor. It doesn't literally mean that children have 100 languages, but it's a metaphor for all the different ways that children express themselves, both verbally and non-verbally, and the ways in which they navigate the world and learn. Most specifically, this is focused on through art mediums. If a child is looking at a building and starts to draw it with crayons on paper, through that art medium of drawing, they are reflecting on the building. They are thinking about its structure and the components to the structure and the environment it is sitting in, and the material it is made out of. So there's reflection and thought, and they are establishing their view of that building all through this art medium and the way they're expressing their thinking through art. And children have many ways of expression. So it's up to us to be able to observe and understand each child's different language. And then there's loose parts, project-based learning, and the emergent curriculum. So what are loose parts? Loose parts are natural materials, upcycled pieces, tin, wood, plastic, blocks, Legos, pieces of fabrics. Many things are loose parts. Essentially, they are things that can be upcycled and organized or arranged, and they're open-ended for the child to work with. Why do we use loose parts? Because they are child-led and they are open-ended and they allow for unstructured play, which then unveils the 100 languages and allows us, the adult, to observe the development and the learning that is taking place. There's also a great benefit in using loose parts to the child's well-being, so emotional well-being, and all domains of development. Problem solving and trial and error and laws of physics and creativity and fine motor and gross motor. There's so many ways to utilize loose parts to benefit the development of the child. What is a provocation? So with the Reggio Emilia approach, we offer provocations. A provocation is an arrangement of materials that are meant to provoke curiosity, engagement, and discovery. Now, a provocation can be made up of loose parts that are arranged in an engaging way. It can also be a pond in a park, maybe coupled with a child has a camera or has a pen and paper. It's anything that the child can look at and engage with, and that will provoke curiosity in that child and wonder in that child. Project-based learning is another really big piece to the Reggio Emilia approach. Project-based learning is long-term collaborative investigations, often in an emergent curriculum, really following that child's interest, but you dive into an investigation for weeks, couple of months with these children, and they investigate it together. They collaborate on projects within this investigation. It allows for a deeper understanding of the concepts that are offered in this investigation. It allows for more skills to be acquired. They revisit experiences, right? We learn through repetition. They are collaborating, so there's a lot of benefit to social emotional learning there. It is a really fantastic way to dive deep into learning and to do so in a collaborative and social way. And emergent curriculum, which we have brought up a few times now. An emergent curriculum is a curriculum that is responsive to the unfolding development, learning, and interests of the children. So instead of taking a curriculum from a book and following it and applying it to your children, you take your children and you apply your children to how are you going to build this curriculum. You observe and you see where they are developmentally. You see, what questions are they asking? Where are their interests leading? You might start an investigation on trees because you notice that every time you go on nature walks, the children like to talk about or point to the trees. But then from there, they start to ask questions about the shapes of the leaves, or the color of the leaves. And then the investigation takes that path. And so things are going you're going to follow the lead of their inquiry and where their interests are and what gets them excited. Maybe they were more interested from the trees. Now they turn to the birds, and so you're looking at habitats for birds. Whatever it is that's exciting them, that's engaging them. And then you're also, of course, looking at where they are developmentally as you engage in activities and you plan activities and the materials you're going to offer to them based on where are they developmentally and what are your developmental objectives, your learning goals. This is also all very intentional, right? It is teacher facilitated. Okay. Now the learning environment. Okay, so the learning environment in a Reggio Emilia inspired classroom or home environment prioritizes well-being. So it's going to be neutral colors, soft tones, warm. We want to reduce any kind of sensory overload. We want it to be welcoming and calming. We also want it to also soft textures, right? Rugs and pillows. Fabrics, like wherever safe, right? You have to always think about fire safety. I did operate a school, so I know, think about the lights and the canopies that you hang, but hanging canopies are a beautiful way to offer softness to a room. It also needs to reflect the learners of the environment. So, of course, it's designed to fit those children's needs. You want appropriately sized furniture. You want the appropriate materials for the children in there. You also want to reflect them in by hanging their artwork and putting that on display for them to be proud of. You can even craft areas together with the children. Have a family wall to reflect their families and the community. Pictured here is a literacy wall in a pre-K classroom that the children made with loose parts, right? They worked on it together, and it's made up of all their different names. Here is an entryway to a classroom that the children built together. So as they walk into the classroom, they are already greeted with this reminder of like, this is our community and this is where I belong. So the environment is reflecting that. You can also have reflection of your greater community in your environment. You can have pictures or pictures on the wall, or even do whole investigations on your community, maybe the town or city you live in, and have that reflected in the environment through documentation. So next is documentation. So documentation is a really big part of the Reggio Emilia approach as well. Teachers take observational notes. This is a form of assessment. It is very important. And this guides practice, right? Because through your observations, again, you're seeing where your children are developmentally, you're seeing how their interest and their inquiry is unfolding. And so that guides your practice and what you do next in your emergent curriculum. But then we also take that documentation and we celebrate it. We celebrate the learning, we reflect the learning back. We put up displays of artwork coupled with recorded dialogue. What were the children saying as they painted this picture? Photographs of them in the process of making that artwork. We put it up on the wall for the children to be proud of, for the families and the community to come and view and engage with. It's a really beautiful log of the learning that has taken place. I love it. It's one of my favorite parts to this approach. All right, now we're going to move on to the Montessori method. So the Montessori method was cultivated by Dr. Maria Montessori in Rome, Italy, in the early 1900s. Oh, and you know what? I'm sorry, I'm going to pause. I'm going to go back for a second because I forgot to mention, and I had intention to do so for each of these. So whether you're in a classroom environment or home environment, I just want to say that all of this applies, right? You're going to use loose parts in open-ended activities. Offer that to your child at home, offer that to the children of your classroom. Artwork that they make, use it to decorate their learning spaces. Curate their learning spaces so that they are warm and welcoming, and so that they reflect their interests and their work. Work with your child to create their play space, and be sure, and document their work. So all of this can apply in your classroom setting or in your home setting. Okay, Montessori. So Dr. Maria Montessori cultivated this method in Rome, Italy in the early 1900s. She was a medical practitioner focused on psychiatry, and she worked with children with developmental disabilities. And through her work, she developed some really fantastic materials and methods to support learning and development. Some key aspects to the Montessori method is that, one, it's structured but flexible. It's probably the most structured of the ones we're looking at today, but it still is flexible and has child-directed activities, just using very specific materials. There's different focus areas within those materials and in the classroom, which include practical life skills, sensorial activities, language, mathematics, and cultural subjects. It is teacher guided, but child led. The teacher will, as opposed to the provocations in the Reggio Emilia approach with the Montessori method, the teacher does presentations, and I'll explain what that is. Also, the work of the child is very individual. It's self-paced. There's mixed-aged classrooms, and there's a respect for the child. So the mixed-aged classrooms allow for a broader range of skills and interests and abilities to interact. The children also learn from each other. If you have a classroom of 3 to 6 year olds, there's a lot of complexity in that dynamic, and they will interact with a lot more complexity. But in that, they also learn a lot from each other. The younger children learn a lot from the older children, but the older children also get that empowering experience of mastery through teaching, right? That's a really empowering thing for those children. And then there's the respect for the child. So teachers respect the individuality and unique learning path of each child. So it is very child-centered and child-led. Looking at the specific materials. So Montessori materials are designed to be self-correcting. So children can learn from their mistakes. And they do teach into specific concepts. So very popular ones are the pink tower, the movable alphabet, number rods. Unfortunately, those are not the ones I have pictured here. But if you look, for example, at these blocks, right? So they are in size order, and it's up to the child to set them up and to make sense of them and see the pattern and to see when something is out of place, right? So in that sense, it is self-correcting. There's also loads of mathematical concepts and literacy and sensorial to be learned through these materials. These here are sound. Pictured here are sound jars. So the red and the blue pair together. Each one has one that's like it. And so the child has to listen to the red and find the blue that sounds the same. The focused areas, right? So these materials all have different focus areas, and in the classroom, the centers are divided by these focus areas. So one of them being practical life skills. So these are activities that involve caring for oneself, caring for the environment. It includes things like dressing boards, this child here who's buttoning this fabric. It also includes things like preparing a snack, watering plants, washing a toy, folding clothes, pouring and scooping, all these like self-help skills, and again, care of self and also care for the environment. Cleaning up a mess after you pour and spill, just cleaning that up. It's all part of the practice. Sensorial activities engage the 5 senses through objects and tools. So here we have these geometric shapes, and so the child is exploring it through touch and sight. Mathematics involve experimenting with number puzzles and bead chains, and a lot of numeracy here. This is an example. Again, the self-correcting, right? The number 1 board only has space for 1 peg. The 2 has 2 spaces, and so on. And so it's up for the child to figure that out and make sense of it. Language includes writing sentences, also just the building of words. So they learn using these materials. They learn sounds, and then and the symbols that go with those sounds, and then eventually they are able to use that phonetic awareness to build words using these letters. And then from there, they build whole sentences. And so there's a lot of various literacy materials, starting with just tracing there's sandpaper, which you saw on the last slide, tracing the letters on sandpaper on wood. And then there's culture. So culture is another focus area, which explores topics like geography and science and artistic art subjects. There's a lot of puzzles of maps that the children can put together and trace and use in a variety of different ways. So how do they learn? How do they know how to use these materials? Well, aside from them being self-correcting, the teacher does a presentation. So the presentation is it's a demonstration of how to complete the activity and use the material from start to finish. So the teacher lays out a map, sets up the materials, uses them, puts them back away, all in front of the children. And likely she's doing all of this completely silently, and the children are sitting there and they're watching her model how it's done. Afterwards, the child is given the flexibility to then go get those materials, set out their mat, set up the materials, and have at it, right? And learn at their own pace. Give it a try, see how it works. It's self-correcting. Remember, if they don't quite remember how to do it, it is self-correcting. And they can do it as many times as they need to. They can, they learn at their own pace, and it's very self-guided. The teacher will take notes on the child's experience to better understand how their approaches to learning are. Work is also very individualized for the child. As you see, these children are sitting on their own individual mat, working on their work. Again, they go at their own pace, and they are responsible for taking out that mat, unrolling it, setting up the materials, then putting the materials away in its designated space, because everything in the Montessori classroom is very organized and the children know where everything goes. And then rolling that mat back up and putting it away. The Montessori environment, as I said, it is very organized. There's open shelves. Everything has a place and the children have to be responsible to know where it goes when they're done using it. It's also neutral, similar to Reggio Emilia, soft tones, neutral tones. Small furniture appropriately sized for the children. Everything is intended for the children's independence. Materials that they can access, furniture they can use. In a home environment, same thing, set up that playroom with open shelves and access to the materials, keep it neutral. You can also get furniture, again, the point is to foster that independence. So you can get things like a Montessori tower, which you see pictured here, and the girl is using it. She uses it to get up to a sink or to get up to the kitchen counter and to be involved in, maybe preparing a snack with her parents. Pieces of furniture like that are Montessori specific or related can be very helpful in a home environment if you want to adapt a Montessori approach at home. All right. Next, we're going to talk about Waldorf. So Waldorf was founded in Germany in the early 20th century by Rudolf Steiner. He was an Austrian philosopher and a social reformer. With Waldorf, there's a really big emphasis on creativity, prioritizing creativity and imagination and holistic learning, aiming to nurture very well-rounded individuals. It's more focused on qualitative assessment, having portfolios for the children, narrative assessments rather than any kind of standardized testing. Some key aspects, also a very big focus on nature, which we will go over. Some key aspects to Waldorf are that it follows developmental stages, Steiner's developmental stages, which are divided by 7 years. So looking at early childhood, those first 7 years, ages 0 through 7. This stage is focused on play-based learning, rhythm, and routine. So there's student-centered and teachers, a combination of student-centered but teacher-led activities. Lots of free play, also lots of time in nature. They do a lot of reading stories and exploring things through story, especially fairy tales. Although reading is not yet taught in this stage. And most concepts will be introduced and explored through art. This is also a stage that is considered a time of taking hold of one's body. There's the whole thing about the teeth, because around age 7, the children are starting to like lose their baby teeth and get their adult teeth. But I think also it has a lot to do with just the amount of physical growth that a child is undergoing in these years, and coming into from early childhood to childhood. Other key aspects include artistic expression. So again, there's going to be a lot of art in this environment, rhythm and routine. Rhythm and routine basically mean that there is a predictable daily and weekly rhythm and routine to their day. So the children have a sense of security. They have a stable learning environment. They know what's happening next. Nature and sustainability are other aspects. So again, there's a really big emphasis on connecting with nature and promoting environmental awareness and sustainability. And there's also, similar to Montessori, there's mixed age groups and consistent class and teacher over many years. The teachers stay with their class for multiple years, which develops a very deep understanding of each child's development and who they are as individuals, their strengths, their personalities and temperament. There's also a really strong sense of community building in this group. It fosters a sense of community and respect. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of empathy built among the children. All right, let's look at connecting with nature. Really big theme. So the children it's their believed to have a strong connection with nature, and that and they benefit from that as a learning environment. Being in nature supports open-ended and self-directed play, which of course we know is critical for physical and mental development. So they spend a lot of time outdoors, exploring nature, exploring the changing seasons. They're free to climb trees. They're free to jump in mud, get dirty, manipulate natural materials. Then also those natural materials are brought into the classroom, right? So classrooms are filled with things like tree stumps and feathers and pine cones, lots of natural loose parts. Children will make handmade toys from these loose parts and do arts and crafts with them. There will also be nature, like whole tables, nature tables, set out with all these materials that have been collected outside, and a lot of seasonal decoration and seasonal themed activities. So this, of course, is going to be dependent on their immediate environment and what region they're in, what part of the world they're in. But their classroom will reflect that natural environment they're in and the season they're in. If it's I'm in the Northeast of the United States and it's fall and everything is red and yellow and orange and it's very beautiful. And so in a classroom, a Waldorf classroom in my area, that would be a lot of reflection of that changing season of fall. There's also nature stories. So again, they engage in a lot of storytelling and listening to stories, and especially fairy tales, things that are pastoral and take place in nature to evoke a sense of wonder. And they celebrate festivals and traditions. So this also would be or should be dependent on the community in discussion or the community at hand, but they will really celebrate and investigate and embrace the festivals and the traditions of that community and of the season that they're in. And lastly, parents are also encouraged to embrace the outdoors, to get outside, even in the bad weather, and get dirty, and just connect with nature. The Waldorf classroom environment, again, as we said, has lots of natural materials in it, wood, wool, silk, and lots of soft colors. Again, similar to Montessori, similar to Reggio Emilia. It's going to be very neutral. It's also going to be very earthy, very home-like. There'll be lots of natural light and soft light to create a calming atmosphere. Again, lots of seasonal decorations as well, reflecting that connection to the natural world. And play areas will include very simple, very open-ended toys that encourage imaginative play and creativity. There's going to be a lot of art materials and a lot of dramatic plays big in Waldorf, right? It's all about that storytelling, and a lot of art and natural materials used in those art areas. Okay. Now, before I conclude, I do also want to take a moment to sort of shout out and put on your radar progressive approaches in early childhood education of the 21st century. There's a lot of history that focuses on Europe and the United States, but this is really a worldwide trend. Vivian, I would like to introduce you to Vivian Pally. She is American. She was American. She was an American pre-K and kindergarten teacher. She was really big into storytelling, and story acting, and had a whole curriculum that emphasized learning through story and through fantasy and imaginary play, with benefit, of course, to language and social and emotional development and cognitive development. She was really big on creating an inclusive community, ensuring that all children felt welcomed and respected, ensuring that all children were able to contribute to classroom decisions. It's very collaborative. So she's someone that I think is worth looking into, or just maybe feeling inspired by. There's also a really big movement in outdoor schools, and outdoor learning spaces. If you've heard of forest schools, this is an outdoor learning space where whatever the weather, the children are out there and encouraged to play and learn from this natural environment, which of course provides a very dynamic and very varied learning experience. But taking it a step further, there's also place-based learning, which can be outdoors or indoors, but it builds its curriculum around the local environment, and so it's all they're learning in the context of their immediate environment, whether that be social, cultural, or natural context. So there's a lot of place-based learning, can be outdoors. There are a lot of play-based outdoor learning where they learn within the context of their natural environment as well as their social. But also play-based learning can occur in urban areas. It can occur in museums. It can occur on a farm. So this is another trend that is very interesting to follow. Also, I want to shout out Te Wariki, and I apologize if I mispronounced that. It is an early years curriculum that was developed in New Zealand. It was first developed in the 1990s, but then revised with more research recently in the 21st century. It has been recognized and adapted and embraced in many areas of Europe, including Norway and Denmark and Germany. This curriculum recognizes the child as competent and as a capable participant of the community. It's a really big theme. Children have their own view of the world. It also prioritizes things like well-being and belonging and contribution and communication and exploration. It translates to woven mat in English, to represent its acknowledgement of all cultures and peoples and their role in society and the coming together of people. The curriculum integrates values of the Maori people, recognizing that children are integral parts of the family and community. And lastly, we have Angie Play, which comes from the Anji County of Zhejiang province in China. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced that. I did practice. Key principles are risk. So embracing risk and risky play, and recognizing that that risk encourages prediction making, and that it's the basis of things like inquiry and learning and discovery, and it's like part of the scientific method. So really embracing risk and risky play, also embracing joy, very important to the experience of childhood. Joy is just a very integral part to the quality of an early childhood program. Engagement, so a sense of connection and purpose, and being engaged in exploration and discovery of physical and social world, and reflection, the process of reflecting on experiences and understanding the meaning in those experiences and what information we are getting. This approach is very, very minimally structured. So the children have extended periods of self-directed, uninterrupted, and unguided play. It serves children ages 3 to 6. It is practiced in all of Angie County's public early childhood programs. It does emphasize a lot of observation on the teacher's part as they observe the children in their play, but the children are using very open-ended, minimally structured materials of all sizes drawn from life. So large pieces of wood and mats and fabrics. The environments are also minimally structured and open-ended environments. They do a lot of outdoor play as well. So I just wanted to make sure that we also pay attention to the global happenings of, this progressive movement in early childhood education. All right, I got through everything within the hour. I am very happy. So we have time for some questions. I do want to point to you that if you haven't seen them already, we do have a whole, if you want to learn more about Reggio Emilia, we have a whole webinar series, which is available on our platform. Also, it's available for purchase on our store. So if you go to WeSchoolhouse.com and you subscribe, or you can do the free trial, you can access our Reggio Emilia webinar series. If you go to WeSchoolhouseStore.com, you can also purchase the webinar series with a certificate of participation. We also have more materials on progressive approaches, more literature on progressive approaches, and guidance on how to embrace them on our platform. And of course, if you want to discuss more one-on-one, you can book a consultation through our WeSchoolhouse store. So I just wanted to, because we went through a lot of information and it's such an interesting topic. So if there's anything further you want to discuss after this, or you want to learn about after this, I just wanted to point you in those directions. And keep your eyes peeled for information about our next webinar, which is going to be in November, on November 20th. All right, let me try to find this Q&A. Got it. Nope. There it is. I think I have to stop sharing. Okay. Okay. Which of these approaches, theorists, would also speak to the inner world of teachers and prioritizing their learning and development? So I would say all of them, but I'm going to talk about Reggio Emilia. So We Schoolhouse is most inspired by Reggio Emilia, and Reggio Emilia is really big on teacher as learner and that continuous research and that continuous work on our understanding and our practice. That is a really big role part to the role of the adult. It is also another big part of the adult's role is advocacy. So remembering the history of Reggio Emilia specifically, it was a small town after World War II looking to have reform for a better future for their community. Also, progressive education in general comes from that sense of reform. So advocating for doing research and advocating for best practices, advocating for what's best for the children of your community, it's all part of the values of Reggio Emilia and progressive education in general. Um, um, we can incorporate all of the approaches in our curriculum, or should we stick to only one? I love this question. So, okay, can we incorporate all the approaches in our curriculum or stick to only one? We have a blend of curriculum that we are using, but of course, bending towards Montessori. So I am a huge advocate for blending these approaches. I mean, the cool thing about them is that they're so flexible. Montessori is pretty structured, and there are schools that are Montessori certified and they follow it very strictly. But I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but why not have, if you love the Montessori materials, purchase them and put them in your classroom. They're great materials. And you can also do that in a Reggio environment, or, with huge connection to nature. If you're, if you, pulling from Waldorf, these are flexible and you can pull from all of them. Can we implement these three Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can blend them together. There's a lot of overlap, especially in the environment. It's a lot of overlap in the value of being child-centered and using open-ended and hands-on activity, connecting with nature. There's a big overlap, I would say, especially between Reggio Emilia and Waldorf, and connecting with nature and using natural materials and loose parts. So you can definitely implement all three of them and pull from all three. Which approach works best? So, I mean, we love Reggio Emilia because I feel like it's so flexible, and it already it involves so much that I really appreciate and align with. It has that connection to nature, it has the collaboration, it has the emergent curriculum, that child-centeredness, embracing community, embracing research and advocacy. And then you can always follow that approach, which again, it's an approach. So it's so flexible, and you can be inspired by it, but then also pull from other things. But yeah, I mean, I think all of these approaches have great benefit to them, and they are flexible for you to use to best benefit your community. Oh, thank you for suggesting that. So, okay, someone is asking if we have a webinar on Remira, which is the recycling center from Reggio Emilia. We don't, but that's something that we can consider, because we do need new webinar topics. And so that is something that a topic we can dive into. So thank you for bringing it up. How do we explain the lack of product to adults who expect a finished product? I love this one too, because we just love talking about how it's about the process, not the product. And we have a whole webinar on that as well. If you want to watch it, it's on our platform or on our store. But yeah, it's about the experience of making the art piece, not what the art piece is going to look like, right? It's about what the children learn from exploring how the materials work, how they work together, through the thinking that's involved, the reflection that's involved in exploring whatever concept they are exploring through art. So no, it has nothing to do with what it looks like in the end. It has everything to do with what happens, before the end, leading up to that. So, okay, which of these approaches inspire play-based curriculum? I would say most play-based would be Reggio Emilia and Waldorf. There's a lot of play and collaborative play in there. Montessori has lovely materials that children do play with. Like, do you understand that when they're working with these materials, it is play for them? And it's individualized. And the materials can be used. And if you want to, bend a little bit, and you can use the materials collaboratively. But most obviously play-based and the least structured would be something like Reggio Emilia or Waldorf, or any of the newer approach, some of the newer approaches I had introduced at the end, which I think. What should I take in consideration when I want to choose a method or curriculum to apply in my daycare? So I think that you want to consider, first of all, your own values and the community that you're within. I encourage you to consider the way you structure your classroom. There's a lot of similarity between these three. So like the way you set up your environment is going to be very similar. If going out into nature is something that's available to you that you want to embrace, consider that. If you're in an area where you really need to bring nature into the classroom, is loose parts. I'm a huge advocate for loose parts. So, do you want to embrace loose parts? Do you want to also embrace Montessori materials? And also consider the children, the community that you're within, and what they would most benefit from. But also, because you also want to think about, well, do you want to do presentations in a Montessori method? Do you want to provide provocations? You could probably do both. I always love a blend and a pulling from different approaches. But also We Schoolhouse really does kind of favor Reggio Emilia. Oh, I see. Okay, my question is, which approaches are best for new teachers or new child care workers? What approach would be best for neurodivergent children with neurotypical? Okay, so again, the thing that I love about all of these approaches is they are so flexible and so inclusive. So you can use any of these with an inclusive classroom with neurodivergent as well as neurotypical children. Of course, just be mindful of the children you're working with, those individuals. The approach best for new teachers. I mean, any of these approaches it's going to require some kind of training and educating for a new teacher that's not familiar with it. But any of them can be learned. We have a lot of really helpful material on our platform that is specifically designed for, or I think just very well designed for teachers that are new to progressive approaches, new to Reggio Emilia. Really try to make it easy and accessible for them. We Schoolhouse was originally, like, way back in the day when it was like first just a baby. It was designed for parents at home that don't have an education background. So a lot of the language is just very accessible, and we try to make it very easy to understand. So if you want, sign up for the platform and, make use of our materials. I hope that they are helpful for you and your team. Um, Getting questions bouncing around a lot again. That happens when we get a lot, but I love the engagement. Um, um, So, okay, someone's asking about, are there required parts in the daily schedule, like in creative curriculum? So the daily schedule is, subject to your school. Um, eh, and we have a suggested like template for a daily and weekly schedule. We also have curated schedules and monthly frameworks on our site. But you can take these approaches and apply them to any structure that you're within, right? As long as you are providing open-ended play and loose parts and that project work, those lengthy investigations, you're connecting with nature. Are you pulling, if you want to do Montessori, are you pulling in those Montessori materials and doing those presentations? How are you setting up your environment? All of these aspects of these different approaches can be applied to whatever structure you have set up in your school, which is also going to differ, per age group, right? And even if, because I know I've worked with programs that were married to other curriculums, like written curriculums, like creative curriculum, um, because they were district classrooms, and but you can still embrace like the creative curriculum with a Reggio approach. Like I've seen it done. And it's just in the way that you present the investigations of the creative curriculum. Um, um, oh, also, sorry, I'm just going back to that question because you mentioned things like large group, small group, free play. We also have some really great materials on if you need guidance on um, like how to structure your routines of the day, like a morning circle, like a large group time, and also small group time. And it's broken down for age group and development. So if you want to check that out, we have that in our program under class management. Um, we we do not have Montessori specific trainings. We can definitely explore offering like more guidance on Montessori, although um yeah, we can explore that for sure. All right, we blend these approaches as well. What can we tell parents who ask what model we use? Yeah, so that's another load of work that we have as educators, is educating families, right? And helping them understand our practice and how we do it and why we do it. I suggest family engagement is so important. So hold information nights, have consistent communication and discussion around what you're doing. This is another area where documentation can be so helpful in like helping the parents understand like what's happening and the meaning behind it. So having like the Reggio Emilia documentation, if you can do documentation. Um, and you can have a Waldorf classroom and do documentation, by the way. Also, uh, our program has a home account. So if you are using a Reggio approach and you're gonna use We Schoolhouse for guidance, you can share our program with the families, and they have access to all that education on what these progressive approaches are all about, what Reggio Emilia is all about, and how it's done. Yeah, so literacy wise, I'm struggling. How can we start teaching our children to read and write by using Reggio Emilia approach? So before you can start like diving into reading, writing, you gotta you gotta first target those really foundational skills of language and communication, and fine motor skills, which, by the way, writing focus, the hand, and also the gross motor with the arm, and coordination, and balance and sitting in the chair, but also even with the mouth, right? It's all about speech. So, because they are not going to understand sounds and letter sounds and make that connection if they don't have the speech first. So offer a social environment, and when you feel they are ready and their speech is strong, you can play around with letter sounds. Please make it playful. Please make it playful. They do not need to be reading, but they can if you introduce it in a playful and fun way at the appropriate developmental pace. Same for writing. We posted a great visual on social media that shows how like the hand isn't even developed really, like the joints are still developing in early childhood, so we really can't stress about writing. Just follow the child's pace. If they're comfortable using pencils and crayons and making marks on a page, just practice that fine motor to develop that strength. Clay, playing with loose parts, offering art, and opportunity to also dive into art in any of your centers. You can have crayons and pencils and paper in every center. And just always having that practice there for them so that they will be ready someday to dive into literacy. I'm a former SPED teacher and pre-K teacher now working as a nanny. How would some of these approaches differ with toddlers versus children in pre-K? So, okay. So yes, of course, as you're working with toddlers versus like a 4-year-old, you have to differentiate for their development. And that comes with understanding of child development and what it looks like at different stages. Um, so there's a lot of guidance on this online. Also on our platform, we have developmental checklists. We have literature on brain development, literature on the developmental domains and how they look across the different ages and stages. And then also suggested activities and suggested ways you can approach learning in a child-centered and progressive and play-based way appropriately for each child. What are some practical strategies for motivating traditional teachers who may be resistant to change to embrace the Reggio Emilia philosophy beyond just the environment, especially in terms of letting go of control and shifting from rote tasks to foster more child-led learning? We have the environment down, but struggling to motivate teachers to let go of what they've done for years. Yeah, and that's something I've seen so much. And I think it comes from like they, help their understanding of the meaning and the actual benefit to development that's there in what they do, how play targets development in all areas. But I think it also just comes from a level of comfort. If they've been a pre-K teacher using worksheets for so many years, and I also empathize, like it's what they know, it's what they're used to, and maybe they don't have a lot of planning time. Maybe there's not a lot of prep time to come up with new creative ideas and to do research and then implement it. I really like, I see it. I know how hard it is. So, use resources that are available to you that make it easier. Use the supports that you have. So, we Schoolhouse does, like, we try to be that for teachers, right? We have investigations that they can dive into to help guide them through a more Reggio approach, a more open-ended approach. We have a lot of literature and webinars and like literally like guides that and activity packets that show them exactly what to do and why they're doing it, and we really try to simplify it. So I think those are helpful. I know that our schools in Manhattan have used them and that they've been helpful for teachers to understand. Let's see. Oh, I don't know, it's just the questions just bounced around again. I lost it. Great. Yeah. Okay. Someone's saying that they follow Montessori, Waldorf, Reggio, and play-based pedagogy. So just pulling them all together. Reggio Emilia approach can absolutely be implemented in lower elementary classrooms and environments, especially project-based learning. Absolutely. I mean, I love yeah, like project based learning is a huge piece, and it's something that I see utilized in elementary schools, and it's in great alignment with Reggio. Also, again, the way you curate your classroom and inviting hands-on learning, um and tapping into children's interests can absolutely be done with older children as well. Okay, so we're going to release information about more information soon about the next webinar and what we will be exploring. But if you want to um, learn more about the about a Reggio inspired approach, we do have a 3-part series, so 3 webinars that break down Reggio. It's on our platform. It's also for sale on the store. When that comes with a certificate of professional development. And then in addition to those webinars, we have a lot of, again, literature and guidance on our platform specific, especially to Reggio. Okay, a webinar there. We have a request for a webinar on loose parts play. Okay, I'm writing that down. All right. And also the other one, Renita, and loose parts. Okay. How can teachers balance child-led learning with curriculum requirements in these progressive education systems? I mean, so yeah, I mean, it can be done. Like we can, I've seen it done. It depends on the curriculum you're working with and how strict your administration is, as far as but you can, if you have flexibility, you can pull from other curriculums, like the creative curriculum, and approach them in a child-led way and in an open, in a more open-ended way and collaborative way amongst the children. Very, very possible. But it does depend on exactly what you're working with at hand. But I encourage you to try to do it. New education policy in India advocates for play-based pedagogies. Oh, I think I answered this one. Which approach um, best inspires a play-based curriculum? I would say Reggio Emilia and Waldorf particularly are more play-based. But Montessori materials, it is still play. Like the child is playing with these materials as they explore them. Um, mm, mm, mm. I'm gonna take just a couple more questions because we are really over in time. But I love all this engagement. Okay. Someone is saying that they blend the approaches together. What can we tell parents who ask what model we use? So, I mean, that's are you leaning more towards one approach than the other? You can say it is a progressive approach inspired by, to elaborate. Um, that's how I would approach it, maybe. That it depends on what it looks like, what your model looks like. How does the um um so yeah, someone's asking about uh third graders and resources for being more Reggio inspired with third graders. So we Schoolhouse focuses on earlier years under age 6. So we most of our resources are for that, right? But I mean, we have literature that's very generalized about these approaches, and so encourage you to use this webinar and those other pieces of literature and other webinars to learn just in general, like what the approach values and the aspects are, and see how you can apply that to your third grade curriculum that you have at hand. Um, And I'm going to take one more. Do you have any suggestions as to how we can get the parents to be more involved in the children's learning and support the curriculum of the center? So just give ample opportunity. Um, I always suggest every month there should be some kind of family engagement event. Um, whether that's a visit and an activity that they do with the kids in the morning, they come in for an hour. Um, you have to, understand parents are working as well, so they might not be able to make all the events. The events will be easier for them to make if it's just a matter of like 1 hour at drop off, like at like, if drop off is at 8:45 a.m. in the morning, so the event is 8:45 till 9:45, and then they can just go into work a little late. That it's a little easier for parents to have that flexibility. You can also do afternoon, or you can do like a virtual event. You can do webinars where parents can chat together during their lunch hour. Um, Try to have at least one thing planned for every month. Community wise, because the more they're involved and in the environment and in discussion with the community, the more they're going to understand what's happening and the meaning of it. Also, just be open to meeting with families to discuss, right? I always love having just being available and approachable to the families I worked with. I never found it to be too overwhelming. Like most families were very um, um, They were very sensitive to my time and their time, and it was never like I never felt overwhelmed. I was always happy to talk with them. And then I also always suggest, so in addition to those community, like maybe class wide or school wide events that you do once a month or once a school wide could be once a season maybe, but also invite families to come in individually and like let them sign up for a Friday where they come in to join morning circle, or do a read aloud, or just play during free play. um, Let them sign up for a day that works for their schedule. The more engagement, the more opportunity for engagement you offer, the better. um, all right, I'm gonna end there. Um, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for coming. Again, if you have any more, anything that you really want to talk about, please reach out. We do one-on-one consultations, and refer to our program, and to see if there's anything there that can help you. All right, thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. Bye.